Claims that Hillary Clinton hijacked the DNC during the election. We'll go outnumbered overtime now. I'm Harris Faulkner. The president is demanding an investigation into bombshell allegations. The DNC rigged the nomination for Hillary Clinton, calling it, quote, the real story of collusion, and saying he believes a crime was committed. This after Politico's publication of an excerpt from former acting DNC chair Donna Brazil's upcoming book. The president again spoke on the controversy before departing for his 12-day trip to Asia.
You ought to look at Hillary Clinton, and you ought to look at the new book that was just put out by Donna Brazil, where she basically bought the DNC and she stole the election from Bernie. So that's what you ought to take a look at.
The AP is also reporting the president says he's disappointed in the Justice Department and that he won't rule out firing Attorney General Jeff Sessions if he does not investigate the Democrats. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen joins us live from Washington with more on that. So, James, that's a new fold-in for the story in just the last few minutes.
Right, and the Democrats to be investigated on what exactly? Donna Brazil's allegations, Uranium One, it's unclear from those comments. Nonetheless, Donna Brazil's claim that the Democratic National Committee rigged the system to throw the primary for Hillary Clinton has revived bitter recriminations and deep political fissures that first surfaced on the eve of the party convention last year when WikiLeaks posted thousands of DNC emails that appeared to show collusion between the DNC and the Clinton campaign. The Democratic congressional leadership has appeared determined to steer clear of the subject of how the party they lead conducted last year's primary. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told reporters yesterday he hadn't read the Brazil excerpt. Today, in an exchange with our ace congressional producer Chad Pergram, the House Minority Leader followed suit.
You know what? You haven't heard me relitigate last year's election. I wasn't involved in the presidential. I'm only looking forward. This is about the future. I haven't had time to be reading any of that anyway.
But among the prominent Democrats agreeing with Brazil is Senator Elizabeth Warren, the progressive from Massachusetts and possible 2020 contender, who yesterday answered my esteemed colleague Jake Tapper with a single word, yes, when the CNN anchor asked if Warren agreed the primary was rigged. The Federal Elections Commission yesterday declined to say whether it is investigating Brazil's allegations, but Tulsi Gabbard, the Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii, in a video posted online today, all but accused Hillary Clinton and the DNC of having flouted campaign finance laws.
These laws essentially allowed the Clinton campaign to bypass individual campaign contribution limits by funneling millions of dollars through the DNC and state parties, taking control of the DNC in the process.
Approached outside of an event here in Washington yesterday, Hillary Clinton declined to answer our questions. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Brazil's predecessor at the helm of the DNC, told us she is, quote, proud of her work in that capacity. Harris.
James, thank you very much. The president has expressed his frustration with the Justice Department. And here's the president once again before leaving the White House for Asia today.
I'm really not involved with the Justice Department. I'd like to let it run itself. But honestly, they should be looking at the Democrats. They should be looking at Podesta and all of that dishonesty. They should be looking at a lot of things. And a lot of people are disappointed in the Justice Department, including me.
My first guest says this DNC scandal is more proof that President Trump was right when he called Hillary Clinton crooked. Let's bring in RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh, great to see you today. There's been a lot of information just forming in the last little bit with the president saying he would maybe consider firing AG Sessions if he doesn't investigate the Democrats. I want to start there with you and then go forward.
Well, the president's frustrated at the DOJ, and understandably so. You look at some of the wrongdoing of Hillary Clinton and the potential statutes she ran afoul of. Here are just a few. Federal Election Commission Act, was that violated when she got the dossier via her lawyer from Russia and hid on an FEC report? Revisiting the Espionage Act and the classified information exchange. Obstruction of justice when her associates beat blackberries with hammers. Campaign finance laws in this latest DNC hubbub. And, of course, bribery statutes with the Uranium One. Those are just a few. I could fill the entirety of your program with more, but there are a lot of statutes to look at and to see if Hillary Clinton violated, and the president wants this investigated. He's right to say the DOJ get on top of this.
The DOJ also get on top of the idea that the Democrats might not have seen a fair shake if they were on Bernie Sanders' side. He's not saying that, you know, he wants to weigh in on what happened behind the scenes other than Were there any crimes committed there with the way that the DNC was spending money against one candidate? He wants that looked at. What do you make of it?
That's exactly right. You know, there are limitations on how much an individual can give a candidate. There are reasons for those limitations. But Hillary Clinton, via the back door of the DNC, was having money funneled to her campaign through this kind of third-party organization. He just wants it looked at. Did this run afoul of campaign finance laws? Was it above board? It's a fair question. These laws are in place for a reason. And yes, a campaign finance violation can become a criminal offense if serious enough and if egregious enough.
How important is it that the American people know about this?
It's extremely important. We have free and fair elections. We have a democratic process. When you go to the polls and you cast your ballot, be it in a presidential race or in a primary, it should be assured that this was a neutral, level playing field. But there was a takedown effort of Bernie Sanders at the DNC. They were all in for Hillary, despite having a neutrality clause in their founding document. They were not neutral at all.
You know, you heard James Rosen's reporting about Democrats that have come out and said, yeah, this is how it went. They're angry about it. One of them from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, and James Rosen had that in his reporting. So when you look at this, this is why this has to go to the spirit of our elections.
It does go to the spirit of our elections. You know, if you don't want to be neutral, don't say you're neutral in your founding document of the DNC. They have a class action lawsuit up against them because people are complaining. You say you're neutral, but you're actually not. Tulsi Gabbard's right to highlight this, but where are people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz? She says she's proud of what the DNC did. She's proud of rigging the election for Hillary Clinton in favor of Bernie Sanders. You think you would see remorse on a day like today when a member of the Democratic establishment like Donna Brazile comes out and outs one of her own, but instead of remorse, she says she's proud. I think viewers should take note and voters should take note of that.
You know, I want to step into something a little bit different, but it involves almost all of these same people. You mentioned Wasserman Schultz. Her name's coming up with that dossier too. So you ask, well, why isn't she weighing in on this? She brushed that aside as well. The fact that millions of dollars flowed from the DNC to fund a dossier on then candidate Donald J. Trump.
It's a big deal, Harris. $9 million from the DNC, which now we know the DNC equals Clinton. So from Clinton 1 as a candidate and Clinton 2 as the DNC, $9 million to this lawyer who lied with sanctimony, according to Maggie Haberman from the New York Times, when asked if he was behind the dossier. Why were they lying about this? Why did Podesta tell Congress and Debbie Wasserman Schultz tell Congress they had no involvement?
All right, so you just tied a loop there for everybody watching, and I want to make sure they don't lose it. You said the DNC equals Hillary Clinton, or HRC, I guess you could say if you want to keep it in initials.
Exactly.
So the reason that you're saying that, though, is if what Donna Brazile is true, and if she produces evidence, and the book doesn't come out until next week, but if we can see evidence to show that Hillary Clinton actually was the main fundraising arm, was the main money getter, if you will, for the party, would there have been some sort of, well, is there a pay for play with that? Does she get, you know, a higher cred and then you push out Bernie Sanders? That's the problem with this.
That's it. It's exactly right. It's unethical. It's not right. It runs afoul of what the DNC says that they stand for. And just to, you know, tie a ribbon here on what's all being put together is Donna Brazile is basically saying that Brooklyn, Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters, was the DNC. Hillary Clinton said in this agreement she got to choose the communications director of the DNC, got to make all messaging decisions, got control of the money at the DNC. That means Bernie Sanders never had a shot. Hillary Clinton was the DNC. Hillary was the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders voters who showed up and voted, your vote basically didn't count.
Wow. Last word from you, Kayleigh, on this point. You know, Republicans watch this, and this is disarray. How does it work in politics? You're at the RNC now. I mean, you're looking at this and you're saying what?
This is disarray. You know, this is the swamp that Donald Trump said he would drain. He's drained the swamp in our party. We have someone at the helm who is here to change Washington, not conform to it. But the DNC, they're in shambles. They don't have a Donald Trump on their side to drain their swamp.
Kayleigh McEnany, thank you. Come back anytime. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Harris. You too.
All right, so we're going to go deeper on this. Potential 2020 candidate, Senator Elizabeth Warren, is also weighing in on what's happening inside her party and the DNC. Watch this.
This is a real problem. But what we've got to do as Democrats now is we've got to hold this party accountable.
Do you agree with the notion that it was rigged?
Yes.
President Trump tweeted this, calling Warren Pocahontas, just stated that the Democrats, led by the legendary crooked Hillary Clinton, rigged the primaries. Let's go, FBI and Justice Department. Stephen Hayes is the editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Stephen, you're stepping in now as this story is cooking on a Friday afternoon, with the president now coming out and saying, you know what, if there is not an investigation into the Democrats, and we haven't learned yet specifically what he's looking for there, but he has talked in detail about what he wants certain items looked at closely, that he would consider firing Sessions if that investigation wouldn't happen. I want to start there with you and then move on.
Well, I mean, the details really matter when you're talking about the president recommending what the Justice Department ought to do and investigating his political opponents. You know, if he has evidence, or if the Justice Department has evidence that there's been wrongdoing or a crime of some kind, you ought to present that evidence to Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions can pursue it. If what you're talking about instead is merely the intra-party rigging of primaries, that's entirely inappropriate for the president to be making that suggestion. Now, I think Donald Trump ends up having been right about the democratic process.
Well, it certainly looks like that.
Yeah, that he complained about. I mean, you've had now.
He called it what it was, rigged.
Right. I mean, I think we knew that. I mean, Harris, you and I were talking about that back while it was unfolding. We knew that that was happening. We knew that the process stunk.
Stephen,
but it's totally different to have somebody like Donna Brazile
and now Elizabeth Warren saying the same thing, Senator Warren saying the same thing. Look, when we were at the DNC convention last summer and you saw Bernie Sanders having to, I likened it to a straight line face, no emotion emoji. Sit there and basically just take it as she went on to become the nominee. We all had all sorts of questions about what had gone on. You know, Elizabeth Warren responded to the president via Twitter, and this is what she wrote. The DNC shouldn't play favorites, but that's a whole lot different from illegally conspiring with Russia. The FBI knows the difference. Stephen, what do you make of that with what she's saying?
Well, look, I'm not surprised that she would offer that response, and far be it for me to agree with Elizabeth Warren very often, but there is a difference between these intra-party fights that we're witnessing right now at the DNC and the questions that have been raised about the FBI. Donald Trump would point you to the questions that have been raised about the compiling of the dossier and the funding of that by the DNC and Hillary Clinton. But those are big differences. And, you know, it's not appropriate for the President of the United States to suggest that that the Justice Department ought to investigate the intra-party battles of his party or of another party unless he has evidence. Now, I'm not sure that's what he was suggesting. It's not clear what he was suggesting.
Well, you know, I throw this out there, and I know you were in the seat getting mic'd up, and you may have missed what Kayleigh McEnany, the spokesperson for the RNC, just said, but there's a connection between the money flowing from the DNC, millions of dollars to pay for that dossier on then-candidate Donald J. Trump, and the fact that Hillary Clinton was the biggest component of fundraising at the DNC and basically was able to shove Bernie out of the way because she was such a draw for them with money. I mean, there is a money flow there, if you will. And if the president is saying, take a look at that dossier, take a look at that funding by the DNC, do you think he's right?
Well, I would assume that Bob Mueller is doing that. I mean, we know that Bob Mueller is looking into Tony Podesta. Yeah, we know that Bob Mueller is looking into Tony Podesta. Mr. Podesta resigned or left his business last week, I think, under some of these kinds of questions. And we've known for a long time that Hillary Clinton had the apparatus inside the Democratic Party to do what we now have had confirmed was done, which was, in effect, rig the process from the beginning. Bernie Sanders folks were saying that all along. It was pretty clear then, but having this additional evidence coming from a party, a Democratic Party insider, I think is such an indictment of the process and you know, the Democratic establishment.
Well, and the glomming on today by other Democrats who were saying, you know, if you're watching social media, well, I thought I knew. Why didn't y'all say something when it was happening?
Yeah.
I mean, how would you categorize the damage now to the Democratic Party? And this matters for a whole host of reasons, because if voters put their votes forth and they weren't honestly voting for the candidate in a fair fashion, that's a problem. But also there's the idea of, are we going to see a third party coming out of this? Where are they now? Is this a nick, a paper cut, or a stab wound?
No, I think this is a big deal. And look, I think some of the kinds of fights that you're seeing inside the Democratic Party are not unlike the fights that you've seen inside the Republican Party. You do have this populist wing of the Democratic Party led by Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and others that has made it their business to take on the establishment. I think they took on the establishment for a long time and lost, in part because of the rigging in 2016. But you can expect them to have much more success going forward, in part because the center of gravity of the Democratic Party today is on the left, not the center left, not sort of the centrist, but on the far left of the Democratic Party, with the emergence of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker and Kamala Harris as spokesmen for the party. I think that is where the Democrats are likely going in the coming years.
Very interesting. Then you have to ask where the voters are going, where will it all shake out, and how this really looks for Democrats moving forward. Stephen Hayes, have a fabulous rest of your Friday. Thanks for joining us. Republicans rolled out a tax reform plan to great fanfare. Fewer than 24 hours later, they are facing resistance from members of their own party. Some worrying about the deficit, others about deductions for state and local taxes in their high tax states and communities. One even called the plan geographic redistribution of wealth. The decisions will affect how much money you get to keep from your paycheck. So can GOP leaders find a compromise? We'll talk with one Republican lawmaker who voted no on that budget reconciliation to get us to tax reform where we are now. So what, if anything, may get him to change his mind and vote yes for what's before him now with tax reform? Stay close.
So the middle class is a big beneficiary. Jobs and companies are big beneficiaries, but the companies really create the jobs. And we really have, Laura, we've had tremendous receptivity to it, to a point that I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it.
House Republicans are reportedly planning to issue additional fixes to their tax reform bill shortly, ahead of Monday's markup. That tax plan is already facing some opposition with the GOP. Senator Bob Corker raised concerns about the impact on the deficit. Lawmakers from high tax states like New York and New Jersey are pushing back over the ending of state and local income tax deductions. Earlier, the House chief tax writer, Kevin Brady, was asked whether federal taxes will go up or down for people paying high tax in states. Watch.
I believe they'll go down, and here's why. We've been working very closely with those lawmakers from the SALT states. That's why here recently, at the end, working with them, we restored the state and local property tax deduction. We've raised the child, what we now call the family tax credit. It used to just go to a few people. Now it goes up to households up to $230,000. That's why we set the income brackets to make sure, look, we want families to keep more of what they earn regardless of where they live, including in our high tax states. We're going to keep working with them. It's very important we help.
Let's bring in GOP lawmaker from one of those high tax states who voted no on the budget reconciliation, which is what got us to move forward on tax reform. New Jersey Congressman Leonard Lance. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Harris.
All right. So right now, you still have to get from no to yes, is how I'm understanding it. What does it take?
I think we should continue the deductibility of state and local taxes. It's been in the tax code since 1913. I live in a high tax state, New Jersey, and this would be true in New York and California and Illinois. And New Jersey, Harris, is a sending state. We send a lot more revenue to Washington than we receive back, and I don't want to exacerbate that situation. Having said that, there are many good things in the tax proposal, lowering the rates, eliminating the AMT, increasing the standard deduction, doubling it. These are good things, but I want to make sure that I'm fighting for constituents I serve in New Jersey.
All right, so and I'm glad you put it that way. You mentioned what you like about this, and you know, this might be a whole umbrella concept, because you can do tax cuts and make people happy. I don't know if you can do tax reform and make everybody happy. It's got to be changed, and I live in New Jersey too. And you've got to put everything on that one piece of paper or in an app or something that people can do their own taxes. I mean, there's some things that have people salivating about this process of change.
Change is always difficult, and in 1985 and 1986, when we last had comprehensive tax reform, SALT was on the table, but it was eventually taken off the table, and we're trying to move our leadership in that direction, and I'm pleased that Chairman Brady is listening to our concerns, and I hope we can move in the direction I have suggested. But certainly it's always difficult to make major changes in tax forms, in tax policy in this country, but obviously we should do that in order to encourage growth in our society.
Your team won. So the American people have looked at this and they have said this was part of the president's platform to make America great again. They want this in some way. Why didn't you look more at spending cuts, or was that a secret that we don't know about? Because I'm not seeing it anywhere.
I think that we should have spending cuts, and I think Senator Corker is taking the lead on that in the Senate, and he has said that before he wants to move forward, he wants to make sure that there is some indication of fiscal responsibility. Harris, I believe in modest dynamic scoring. I don't think we should have completely static scoring, but I don't want it to be out of the ballpark either. And I want to work with those, both here in the House and on the Senate side, to make sure that the projections are realistic, because after all, we want to move forward in a fiscally responsible way. All right.
When you say modest dynamic scoring, I take you to mean, you know, that $1.5 trillion deficit hit that this is said to have, this version of it is said to have. We heard from Kevin Brady yesterday, the chairman of the committee, who said, well, no, it might be north of that just a little bit. You know, it's problematic when you talk about really big numbers, and we haven't heard much about those spending cuts. So maybe we'll hear from Senator Corker very soon on that element of it. I want to ask you, though, about voting no on legislation moving forward and what that's like as a lawmaker, because the American people are looking at you to get something done. How frustrating must it be? You're one of the 20 that are saying no to this.
I'm saying no to the proposal as it was introduced. However, there's been some movement because Chairman Brady has suggested $10 in deductions for property taxes, and I would like to see that increased. We're at a different place from where we began. The original suggestion was that there could be no help for states like New Jersey, and we're moving in a direction where I think there can be help, and I want to continue that, and certainly I want to continue to work with our leadership. And it took 2 years in 1985 and 1986. I don't think this has to be done in the next 2 or 3 weeks, just so it's done in a time frame that it can be effective for the new calendar year, 2018. This is when the bill would go into effect for taxes to be paid in April of 2019, Harris.
All right, that was very helpful, Congressman Lance, making it very clear that there could be some sort of a sliding scale as you deal with SALT and property tax issues, so that's helpful to know. Also helpful to know that you would still have the political will to want to get this done after 2018, because you really only have 20 working days left there on the Hill as I read it. Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey, thank you for joining us today, and we'll keep on you in the process as it goes forward.
Thank you, Harris.
Sure. 8 years after walking off his base in Afghanistan and becoming a captive of the Taliban, Bo Bergdahl has learned his fate in a North Carolina courtroom. Also, President Trump boarded Air Force One earlier today to embark on the longest trip to Asia by any sitting American president in nearly 25 years. A lot of topics on the table. The big focus, likely North Korea. I'll bring in my next guest, Ambassador John Bolton, on how he'd advise the president during his historic visit to a volatile.
Great success. We'll be talking about trade. We'll be talking about, obviously, North Korea. We'll be enlisting the help of a lot of people and countries. We'll see what happens, but I think we're going to have a very successful trip. There's a lot of goodwill.
President Trump from earlier today saying he expects North Korea to be a hot topic during his 12-day tour of Asia. This, as a report claims, the rogue nation could be preparing another missile test, and the U.S. weighs whether to redesignate them as a state sponsor of terror. Let's bring in the former ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor, Ambassador John Bolton. Great to see you today. This is a big trip, the longest by any sitting president since George H.W. Bush did so nearly a quarter-century ago. First and foremost, what do you want to see?
Well, I think without doubt the North Korean nuclear weapons program is at the top of the agenda, although there are a lot of other issues. The president mentioned trade. You've got Chinese expansionism in the East and South China Sea, what the nations of Southeast Asia think the United States ought to do. But the top of the list is certainly North Korea, and I think the fear that CIA Director Mike Pompeo said just a few weeks ago that the North Koreans, after a long effort over 25 years, are very close to being able to hit any target they want in the United States with a thermonuclear weapon. So we've got to decide as a country, are we happy to live with that? Is that fine with us? Or are we going to follow through on what the president said and denuclearize North Korea?
Let's talk about China a little bit. I'm reading today that China's President Xi Jinping, and now a new second term, so another 5 years for him, has picked up a lot of power as the top leader of China's Communist Party. And that, you know, if you look at him, there are a couple things that are important as these two presidents or these two leaders meet. He really rewards loyalty. What do we know about Xi that we need to know in terms of putting some pressure on China to get them in the game further with North Korea?
Well, if the reports coming out of the 19th Communist Party Congress are accurate, he has succeeded in getting himself elevated to a position of strength in China not seen since the days of Mao Zedong, both ideologically and in terms of stocking the leadership with his supporters. And this has been a consequence of a long campaign to get there, and no successor was named to him in the 19th Party Congress, unusual in recent years. So I think at the pinnacle of his power, he can address the North Korean threat from a position essentially unchallenged in China. And I think the President, Trump, has to be very direct with him, that we want, after 25 years of being jived by the Chinese, we want Chinese pressure on North Korea, either to bring the regime down, to reunite the peninsula, or to eliminate the nuclear weapons program. And if we don't see it, and see it soon, we're going to have to consider taking preemptive military action ourselves. I, for one, am not prepared to live with a North Korea with nuclear capabilities. And the president, as I say, has said denuclearization is the only way forward. We can do it the easy way, Mr. Xi Jinping, or we can do it the hard way.
All right. Ambassador, real quick before I let you go, is there any sort of word that you would hope that this president would give the re-elected leader of Japan at this point?
Well, I think he should encourage him strongly to amend the post-World War II Japanese Constitution to allow Japan to act as a normal nation and to prepare its defenses. I think we need help in East Asia. I think Japan is ready for it, and I think they stand with us on the North Korea question in a very, very important way.
All right, I'm asking our team if we have time for one more. We learned that he may meet with President Putin of Russia. Real quick, your thoughts?
Well, I think he should say the same thing to Vladimir Putin. We expect that you're going to work with us and not play with us to eliminate the North Korean nuclear weapons program. And by the way, once that's resolved, we're going to deal with the Iranian nuclear weapons program, too.
All right. That's what the president told Laura Ingraham last evening. We appreciate you responding to all of this. I know you've got to scoot. Ambassador, thank you very much for the preview of the president's trip to Asia. Fox News Alert now. The judge in Bo Bergdahl's court-martial has ruled that Bergdahl will not serve any prison time for abandoning his post in Afghanistan. Laura Ingle is live in New York with more on this. Laura?
Hi, Harris. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was shaking and appeared emotional as the verdict was read today, that coming from court observers. The judge on the case deciding to give him a dishonorable discharge, a demotion, a pay reduction, but again, no prison time for desertion, a decision that President Trump is already tweeting about. He tweeted this just moments ago. The decision on Sergeant Bergdahl is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military. Now, as we know, the president has been vocal on this for a while. While campaigning last year, he called Bergdahl a dirty, rotten traitor. Well, today's decision comes after the 31-year-old pleaded guilty last month to endangering his comrades by walking off his post in Afghanistan in 2009. He was then captured by Taliban allies and held for 5 years. He was brought home by President Barack Obama in 2014 in a swap for 5 Taliban prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. Prosecutors on the court-martial were asking for at least 14 years in prison, pointing out out to the judge that Bergdahl's fellow soldiers were seriously wounded during searches for the then private first class. One Navy SEAL testified he was shot in the leg and now walks with a limp. He said they searched for Bergdahl even though some of them knew he walked away on purpose. Bergdahl's lawyers pushed for leniency during their closing arguments. They asked for no prison time, arguing he had a previously undiagnosed mental illness when he walked off the base that day. Bergdahl's lawyers say they will appeal his dishonorable discharge.
The dishonorable discharge is a lifetime stigma that deprives him of substantial benefits, which he badly needs, obviously. And you all have been in the courtroom. He does need medical and other care.
And again, the big headline here, Harris, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl will spend no time in prison for desertion in Afghanistan in 2009. We'll bring you more reaction as we get it here.
Yeah, and such a big headline when you look at the sacrifices that were made to bring him home. Laura Ingle, thank you very much. Democrats say Attorney General Jeff Sessions has some explaining to do following a former Trump campaign advisor's meeting with the Intel Committee. His testimony regarding a trip to Russia contradicts what then Senator Sessions told a Senate committee. But is that enough to force the top U.S. law enforcement officer back to Capitol Hill to answer more questions? Power panel just walked in the door. Kevin. Oh, this is the story that's been heating up on this Friday. We're going to get back into it. New revelations from a former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page, prompting questions now about testimony given to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Page testified privately to lawmakers yesterday that back in 2016, he informed then Senator Sessions about a trip he was going to take to Moscow. He said it was unrelated to the campaign, but this contradicts what Sessions told lawmakers in July, that he did not know whether Page traveled to Russia. Now Democrats want him to clarify his testimony. Zach Buchanan is the president of Buchanan Strategies and a former Hillary Clinton campaign staffer. Boy, but he's been busy today. And former DNC advisor. Oh boy, that book by Donna Brazile. Outnumbered from the couch, Kevin Jackson, executive director of the Black Sphere and Fox News contributor as well. I put all of this in the kitty together because the president has weighed in today and said, you know what, and he's ruling it out. He's saying he's not ruling out whether or not he'd take another look at Jeff Sessions if he doesn't look at the Democrats.
I think Sessions should. And I know Zach and I disagree, but I think that we are chasing this whole Russia narrative, and Jeff Sessions should be looking at onshore. We don't need to go to Kiev to understand what's going on, or St. Petersburg. We can look right here and look at everything that's going on. It's easy to connect the dots. The American citizens have connected these dots the same way we connected the dots on what happened with the DNC.
So what you're talking about is the dossier and the DNC paying and Hillary Clinton campaign paying
using
for that
information to get the FBI investigation going.
There's no proof of that, but okay. There's not.
There's also no evidence of any collusion or anything with the campaign.
Well, we have more evidence of an attempt to collude today than we did a week ago.
The point is that there's no evidence actually of it. But go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, I think that Donald Trump certainly would like to fire Jeff Sessions, and the reason he would like to do that is because it would undermine the Mueller investigation.
Not at all.
The only reason that Jeff Sessions is not in control of it is because he had to recuse himself, because it is increasingly likely that he is a subject of this Russia investigation.
Zach and I argued about this off camera. The last thing Trump wants. What President Trump wants is for Mueller to do his job.
Oh, that's so not true.
And if Mueller did his job, and that's quite frankly, that's why he's allowed Mueller to stack the deck with Hillary people with everything.
You mean on his team?
On his team and everything. Because at the end of the day, if Mueller does his job, it's going to point right back to Hillary Clinton, the DNC, the Democrats in general, and as I said on Outnumbered, probably goes as high as Barack Obama, who started paying for the dossier through OFA.
This is absolutely hilarious, given that
Obama for America, for the school kids that might not be keeping up OFA.
Given that this week we have 2 federal indictments and we have 1 guilty verdict because one of his staffers lied to the FBI about their communications
One
with
of the federal indictments
Russia.
was with Manafort, who was at the time working with the Podesta group in the Clinton campaign. I mean, you can spend
John Podesta, that's on your side, Zach. And his brother just had to step away, Tony Podesta, from the company that bears their name.
But if Tony Podesta was working for Manafort and broke the law, they all should go to jail. But the question is about George Papadopoulos, the foreign policy advisor who learned about the hacking of the emails by Russia before anybody else knew about it.
You're exactly right.
And it's what's interesting about it is he communicated to top-level officials of the campaign throughout his entire thing about his communications with the Russians, about trying to go meet with the Russians. And he was encouraged by his campaign.
And Kevin, you say what?
I say, let's hear it all. That Donald Trump has already said.
Absolutely.
He said, whatever you find out about these satellites, do it. When they accused Donald Trump Jr. of a meeting, what did he do? He released all of his emails. He didn't selectively.
Untrue.
Okay, so if we want to talk about
first he lied about the meeting.
If we want to talk about who's releasing data versus bleach bit and beating up on
I just want to correct the record. You're making it seem like the people in the Trump campaign have been transparent from the very beginning. In fact, they have lied at every single turn. So Don Jr. lied about his meeting. Jared Kushner lied about setting up a back channel with the Russians. George Papadopoulos lied to the FBI about his communications.
Because there's no such thing as setting. Okay, well here, what's funny about the back channel is if Donald Trump was colluding with the Russians. And he's got this going. Why would he need to set up a back channel? That's something that you guys have never been asked. Why would someone set up a back channel?
It's a question that I have been asking for quite some time. Why would you need one?
Because it's during the time of the transition, and what they were trying to do was go around U.S. intelligence. Now, why would a United States presidential
let me step in there. That is your opinion.
No, it's not my opinion. That is in fact the entire purpose of setting up that back channel, so they could go around United States intelligence. Why would you want to do that? Why?
Look, we can talk about all this.
Why don't you want American intelligence to know what you're talking to the Russians about?
Well, really, so why is it that we can't get the simple answers with respect to Hillary Clinton and emails and
you're throwing up smoke screens. It has nothing to do with it.
It's not a smoke screen, because what's funny about it is, and I talked about this earlier, anytime we get into these types of investigations, when you talk about Fusion GPS, you talk about the that's exactly what you say, until it's Donald Trump. If Donald Trump were doing
We're talking about the Donald Trump investigation. You're talking about non-Trump related stuff.
I'm going to try to get these guys on the next topic. President Trump's straight talk helped get him to the White House, but how will it be received on his trip to Asia? We might have a little bit dripping left from this, and then we'll move on to that. Stay close.